Hi, Bhargav. Good morning. Thanks for jumping on. Look, I wanted to catch Jude as well on Southeast Asia, but he's not available at the moment. I want to get a quick overview of EMEA and also South Asia from you. I'll just carry off in Ude's absence. The key issues in Southeast Asia today are, of course, the ongoing Papuan violence. Indonesian government, after what must be going on 5 decades of rule, is still trying to treat them as savage dogs and trying to stabilise it by hitting them with a flash torch. So it's kind of a barbaric solution and getting a barbaric response. The dynamic in the region, of course, is Thailand is basically going, look, we are going to open up. We're going to open up in a staged way, but we're going to simplify the rules which have been barriers to entry, so that we're going to simplify what we did in Phuket for the other startups. So that's quite dynamic, though it's fraught with danger too, because COVID and COVID controls have not been handled well in Thailand by their own admission, but they're going to roll on because they need the service sector to crank up. The other notable issue that our clients need to be aware of is the fairly credible terror threat. It's been reported by officials in Myanmar, Myanmar, Thailand, Malaysia and Singapore. It's been initiated by intelligence networks in Japan. Though the Five Eyes loves to blow its own trumpet about its own superiority, they do so on electronic measures only. Their human intelligence is a bunch of public servants only, congested around a table in a 6-star hotel. They're very archaic. The Japanese have a lot more mature human intelligence networks that integrate with their electronic networks. The fact that this is out there means the smarter human intelligence networks of those countries I mentioned are going to be working this to the hilt. So I would imagine that this is going to avert the identified incident. They're probably the key issues just quickly for today in Southeast Asia. Bhargav, obviously there's some issues in Europe, notably Germany, I think the UK too, but also the situation in Afghanistan. Notably, I'm going to state here that when Japan and Germany lose a war, they have to do massive repatriations of payments. It appears though America then decides it can actually pump in funding under the NGO, and even though it's lost, it wants to act like a self-righteous victor. So could you please talk about those issues I've mentioned?
Certainly, Paul. It's interesting the developments you mentioned in Southeast Asia, and EMEA is not far behind it. There are enough dramas in EMEA as well, Europe, Middle East and Africa. Starting with Germany and the UK, there are quite a few protests and standoffs between the authorities and the protest groups. In Germany, it's the labor force, especially in the retail supermarket sector, wherein they want a raise in pay, and it is an opportune moment for them because the elections are slated for later this month. I guess it'll be in the next month, but at the same time, the elections are quite crucial because the very famous president of Germany, Angela Merkel, is likely to step down, and she has been in power for nearly 15 years now. And the labor movements, that is the far left and the right wing, are trying to gain as much momentum as possible before the elections. And I believe this is part of the same circus, the election circus, which happens every 5 years in Germany. And in UK, it is not very different. However, the focus is largely on the pro-environmental groups. They have been vandalizing statues and major monuments, and they are blocked off major junctions in the city of London, I mean, and they've also tried to block a major motorway or highway, as you may call it. I think M25 was blocked yesterday, and it continues to be, they continue to try to block today as well. Paul, any inputs on that? Do you think these labor groups have any stuff in them in Europe, or do you see them, buckling down under the pressure of the growing right-wing movements across Europe?
Look, I just think it's typical of the lack of discipline amongst European, British, American, most of the Western nations. As I often state, there's a difference between the right for freedom of speech and the right to be a lunatic. I think that the left and right divide is going to continue to be an issue throughout throughout the European continent. It always has been. It's been escalating. And behind that, there are specific sparks of disunity between the various ethnic groups within those European countries, growing refugee. The growing refugee issue is going to further compound that. When you have two opposing parties that neither of them have an ability to listen or think or apply rationale or come to the middle, you can expect further problems. I think it's going to be a growing issue over the next decade.
I must agree, Paul. Chancellor Merkel, I beg your pardon, she's actually the chancellor, not the president. Chancellor Merkel had led from the front in ensuring that there is stability in the European Union, and probably she lost the plot when she went a step ahead and opened the doors for refugees unilaterally. Now, moving on to the Middle East, Afghanistan continues to be unpredictable to a greater extent, and the US has opened up its bank to fund some of the developmental or humanitarian projects through NGOs. To what extent it is true, or will it come with riders that the Taliban government needs to follow through, whether it is education for women or overall law and order situation or inclusive government, we do not know at the moment. It is likely to come with a lot of conditions and strings attached. I must agree with you, Paul, when a country loses a war, as humiliating as it was for the US, they do not seem to see the mirror, at least they haven't seen yet. Any thoughts on that?
Yes, look, I mean, unfortunately, the Allies, the Five Eyes, which of course includes my country, the UK, Canada, New Zealand, America, NATO, at some point, America has to understand, whilst it wants to play the world's major force, it has to address the way it interacts, thinks, and it needs to get more objective and serious about the mismatch between its values and the rest of the world's values. It seems to think that both democracy and its form of ruthlessly narcissistic capitalism, and if they don't address their self-dominating views, then they're going to be in a world of hurt. Now, there's been many examples going right back to Vietnam that perhaps your values don't give you a will to fight on the ground. They give you a will to dictate politics at the State Department. You know, now I sit in the middle of politics, but when an absolute narcissistic lunatic like Trump can get to become a president, it shows that your own society doesn't have an ability to look clearly at a situation. And what's worse than that is the State Department's dictatorial arrogance set a platform that Trump could get to the top. They have to now start seeing that on a PPP basis, are no longer the largest GDP in the world, and that their system is self-serving and lacks any agility. So the West, unless it can start overcoming some of its views, which are very myopic, China's going to continue to make inroads, and their inroads are going to be done with one clear voice, therefore a very clear strategic path, and they're going to dominate rare earth minerals, energy, land bridges, and project themselves in a manner that capitalises on the fact that the NATO and the states are forcing an alignment against them, notably, but not only, China with Russia, with Iran, with Saudi Arabia, and of course, you know, North Korea for what that's worth. But if you're trying to control and dictate when you've just been spanked, then it probably indicates, one, you haven't learnt from going in when you shouldn't have. Two, your emotional reaction to an attack on your nation has destroyed big parts of two countries, and now you're going to try and fund your way out of it. So, I mean, look, we can talk about this all day, but the reality is that it's an absurdity, and there are no systems and balances to go rain check. Nobody wants you to lead this, okay?
Yes, Paul, I must wholeheartedly agree with you. At the same time, if we move on to South Asia, the farmer protest movements continue. There is one scheduled for today in Bangalore. Farmer movements were triggered, yes, last year, basically, with the passing of controversial farm bills, and the whole country was clamped down with protests across major cities, especially Delhi. And it's likely to reappear again with COVID subsiding. In fact, COVID put a break. Let's say second wave of COVID put a break on all of the farmer protests last year, but this year hopefully it will be managed better by the government, and there is some sort of a deal between the farmer associations and the government. Paul, with that, we are done with South Asia and Middle East and Europe. Any final thoughts?
Oh, look, I just think that South Asia is obviously massive complexity. You've obviously got another issue there. Was a leader of the Samajwadi Party was shot in Uttar Pradesh. In Pakistan, political parties, student unions, and civil society groups joined journalists. I think it was protesters in Islamabad yesterday. So I think that the complexities between EMEA, South Asia, Southeast Asia, and even multiple demonstrations planned in Australia show that it really is an emphasis now on protecting your business by being foresighted. I think a lot of companies don't hire internally well. We find that our clients generally very mature, but we have a lot of inquiries from people wanting to purchase risk management projects, but think they're haggling for a T-shirt in the Bangkok night markets. I think we're going to see a massive maturation in how companies manage their risk and how they outsource. I think a lot of the outsourcing's become overly commercial, underskilled, driven by business development managers, and the key skill they look for is a pretty guy in a nice accent in a suit. I think way too many companies have got way too many inexperienced intelligence analysts, when really what they've got is some smart kids getting some work experience. So, just what we're seeing just today on what we've overcome probably highlights that most companies aren't on top of it, though they think they are, because they use a traditional approach of somebody with some idea recruits somebody with some words in a CV that match a job description. That's about as rigid as they get. We've seen a dumbing down and an expansion, an unnecessary expansion of internal teams, particularly in the banking sector. Bhargav, thanks for your time. Apologies, Uday couldn't make it, but with what's going on in Myanmar and the CIT attack against a bank vehicle, it's understandable. So we'll chat tomorrow, okay?
Certainly, Paul. Thanks a lot for your time. We'll catch back tomorrow.